afternoon, America. Welcome back to Four Things You Need to Know this afternoon. It's Monday, August 11th, 2025. A new week with bigger headlines. I'm Erick Erickson. Today, President Trump's bold federal action in Washington, a tech industrial deal redefining chip exports, legal drama in the Epstein case, and Europe's scramble ahead of the Trump-Putin diplomacy in Alaska. Let's dig into the headlines. First up, Washington, D.C. Crime, homelessness, and a federal takeover of the Washington judicial or criminal justice system. The president is invoking Section 740 of the Home Rule Act, placing the Metropolitan Police Department under federal control and deploying 800 National Guard troops, led by Attorney General Pam Bondi and Interim Police Chief Terry Cole, to tackle what he calls crime and homelessness in the Capitol. The action covers up to 30 days pending congressional review. Local leaders are sounding the alarm. D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwab and Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton call the move unprecedented and potentially unconstitutional. Hint, it's not. They just don't like it. Now, here's a contradiction at play, supposedly. Violent crime is down in the District of Columbia, at least according to the data, 35% lower in 2024 compared to the prior year, but the president argues the city remains unsafe and needs liberation. But the District of Columbia Police Union has accused department officials of actually rewriting crime statistics to make things look lower, and objectively reports of crime are down in some parts of the city, but it's because people know it does no good to report the crime, not because crime is actually down. Public safety is a core obligation of government, local, state, or federal. Trump sees a failure at the city level and is exercising authority to fill the gap. Critics warn this undermines local autonomy, but conservatives' values have always stressed federalism with flexibility for exceptional circumstances. If public order truly is failing, bold action might be warranted, but it needs to be temporary, accountable, and it needs to be transparent. But also, the District of Columbia is a uniquely federal entity, and the federal government can and should control the crime situation there. People aren't safe, and the government's engaged in a cover-up on the crime data. Now, tech and trade, where pragmatism meets security. The president announced that U.S. chip makers NVIDIA and AMD will now share 15% of their AI chip revenue from sales to China with the U.S. government. The deal comes alongside renewed export licenses for certain AI chips, namely NVIDIA's H2O and AMD's MI308. The AP confirms the companies agreed under U.S. government pressure to share revenue from the sales. The Wall Street Journal and others highlight concerns about constitutionality and national security. Free markets are vital, but national security sometimes demands careful regulation. But y'all, this is a terrible precedent. It's going to get the government more and more involved in the private sector. If Republicans are willing to do this with AMD and NVIDIA, wait until you see what the Democrats will do. And in the process, we're giving technology to our enemy, the Chinese. This is a terrible deal of crony capitalism at its worst, and no conservatives should not applaud this deal, and we shouldn't gloss it over by claiming national security concerns. If it's a national security concern, we shouldn't be letting it happen, but we are because of a shakedown by the Trump administration. The fact that a private sector company gets to negotiate and deal with our enemies because they're giving the president 15% of their profits is corruption. Next, the Epstein Maxwell investigation and another, twist in judicial secrecy. The Justice Department is asked to unseal grand jury transcripts from the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell cases. Federal Judge Paul Engelmayer in New York has denied the request, ruling that releasing the transcripts would create the illusion of transparency rather than meaningful discourse. The judge stressed confidentiality needs outweigh public curiosity. Additional information, there actually weren't a lot of witnesses, only 2 testifying between both grand juries, and much of what was seen was already been reported publicly or was used at trial where it could be. Now, look, I believe in transparency, but I'm also a lawyer, and the cost of undermining due process is real here. Grand jury secrecy protects the integrity of criminal investigations. The system demands discretion. That said, if there's systematic abuse, Congress can investigate and not just rely on public pressure to break the law. The ruling underscores the balance between confidentiality and accountability, and frankly, it was expected by most people in the legal community who saw this situation. Finally, Ukraine and diplomacy with, Germany taking the lead, which should concern us. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz wants to convene an emergency virtual summit on Wednesday. bringing together President Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and top European and NATO leaders. The goal is to reach transatlantic consensus before Friday's Trump-Putin Summit in Alaska. Merz wants to coordinate positions. He insists on a ceasefire before peace talks. He demands Ukraine's input, and he wants to prevent unilateral land swap diplomacy that could legitimize Russian occupation even closer to Germany. We'll see if the president goes along with this. Diplomacy is kind of best done with partners, not in isolation. If the president is going to engage Putin, Europe and Ukraine want a seat at the table. That's realism, not weakness on their part. A negotiated peace imposed without Ukrainian consent actually risks betraying principles and creating dangerous precedents in the situation. And also, you should note that if we do engage with peace and give Russia some of the land of Ukraine, what's to stop Vladimir Putin from just building up arms, waiting for a new president, and invading again? It's more likely than not. You cannot trust Vladimir Putin. These are the 4 things you need to know this afternoon. The president is engaged in a federal takeover of D.C. law enforcement. It's bold, controversial, only be for about 30 days. High stakes for local control there. There's a tough love deal, a corrupt 15% transaction headed to the federal government of chip sales to China, which is just crony capitalism. Conservatives would condemn if it was anyone other than Donald Trump. A judge has shielded the grand jury information in Epstein, and Europe is stepping up to insist on coordination with the president in this deal with Ukraine because it affects their backyard, not ours. Each story binds power to responsibility, whether in your streets, your marketplace, your courtroom, or on the world stage. I'm Erick Erickson. Thank you for your afternoon attention to this matter. It is the 4 things you need to know before you get home this afternoon. Let's keep the light shining on the balance between power and principle. Stay engaged, stay informed, and above all else, please keep the faith.